Hey guys, Graham and Chris back here with you once again for another weekly show of Out of Left Field. Ton of stuff going on this past week in baseball. More big names getting signed. We're getting one team in the NL East signing 80 years of age worth of two players, and the Major League Baseball 2016 season awards come out, and the guys here at Out of Left Field managed to go 6 of 8 on our picks, and I think we're going to make a pretty compelling argument as to why we probably should have either been at least 7, 8, or maybe even gone 100% coming down the stretch. So without further ado, I got Chris here with me. Let's put the ball in play and get after it, Battle. What do you say?
Sounds good to me, man. Let's start, of course, with the ones that we knew. The ones that we thought were the no-doubters, right? Rookie of the Year came out this week. And you got
Corey Seager and Michael Fulmer.
Corey Seager and Michael Fulmer. And I think that when you and I made those picks now about 6 weeks ago, maybe 8
something
weeks
like
ago?
that. Yeah, it was about a month and a half, 2 months ago, yeah.
Yeah. I think that there was no doubt then, just like there was no doubt on Monday afternoon when they were announced that those were the two guys who were going to win Rookie of the Year for the American National League. Corey Seager had a career year for a veteran in his rookie year as a Los Angeles Dodger.
Yeah, a unanimous decision as the winner by the Baseball Writers Association of America. I mean, took home, every first place vote, and yeah, I mean, it's a season that would, like you said, would make even the most veteran player, envious of what he was able to do for a team that also made it to the postseason.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and not that it's rare for the Dodgers to make it to the postseason, but it's rare for a kid who comes in and, he's got a brother that's playing baseball. They're both big bats, but Corey Seager just turns around and shows that he is without a doubt a complete baseball player. He's a five-tool guy. He's fast. He's strong. He's a hitter. He can throw. I mean, he can play that corner like a pro, and he is.
Yeah, I mean, and like you said, 308 average, 26 homers, better than a lot of guys that we saw this year, even better than obviously some of the guys on his team who have been there for quite a while. Beats out Trey Turner and his teammate Kenta Maeda for the National League Rookie of the Year. Maeda, like you said, he's come over, he's played professional baseball, obviously in a different country, but he's still played before, so it's kind of the idea of a guy that's come in who has kind of understands the idea of professional baseball coming in and winning. Granted, coming into L.A. is a lot different than where he was playing, and it's a lot easier than Ichiro, who went to a small market like Seattle, which because you were stationed at Fort Lewis there. They're very passionate about the team, and it was great to see him come there, but the market is vastly different than where you were, kind of born and raised in the, in California, either in North California, SoCal, whatever it might be.
Yeah, it's a whole different world in Southern California, and we've seen sports stars, not just baseball players, but we've seen sports stars go down into that huge market. They get into that Hollywood sort of mindset, and really kind of just lose it, not really live up to what you might expect from a guy coming into the league. Corey Seager, though, I mean, let's not forget that this young shortstop who is in a league with some pretty amazing shortstops, right? I mean, you can't argue with the fact when you got the Cubs middle infield, you got the Giants middle infield. This guy plays in a league with other good shortstops, and finished third in the National League MVP voting as a rookie. So this isn't just a kid who came in and played better than all the other rookies in the league. This is a guy who came in and achieved a third-place vote as the most valuable player in the entire National League.
And surprisingly, even as good as he was, wasn't a Gold Glove finalist. Justin Turner was the only Dodger who garnered a Gold Glove. But we flip leagues, and it brings up Michael Fulmer, who anybody that has paid attention this week to all the stories that came out about him, it's pretty funny. There was an interview done with Michael Fulmer on MLB Network where they announced his receipt of the award, and Michael Fulmer is a plumber in the off season. Does all the regular plumber stuff. He picked it up. He works for his friend's uncle's plumbing business, and they asked him if he was going to stop doing it, and he said no because it kind of helps keep him busy. He has time to train and maybe play some golf, but he likes to do his plumbing work, which obviously it begged the question from Mike Golick on Mike and Mike on ESPN in the mornings of, does Fulmer have plumber's crack? It's a question that if we are fortunate to have Michael Fulmer on the show, I don't plan on asking him that.
I think that Golick just wants to know if Michael Fulmer has plumber's crack because Golick has plumber's crack, and he doesn't want to be alone in the world.
Well, after the butt photo that he was forced to do on the, because of, I think it was the March Madness sheet of integrity, I think he just wants to, he doesn't want to feel left out. But, Fulmer made a statement. We knew coming in that he was going to be, it made sense for him to be the Rookie of the Year. There really wasn't anybody coming up who had played an entire season that garnered the type of numbers and what he meant to his team as Fulmer did. And the reason that I caveat that with didn't play a full season is a guy that we highlighted on the show very early on once he was up in the show was catcher Gary Sanchez of the New York Yankees. Sanchez comes in second with 91 points. Fulmer had 142 points. Fulmer had 26 first-place votes and 4 second-place votes. Sanchez had 4 first-place votes, 23 second-place votes, and 2 third-place. And a massive drop to the next 5 guys. Tyler Naquin of the Indians finished third with 20 points, 2 second and 14 third. And then it goes down to guys with Chris Davinsky, Edwin Diaz, Nomar Mazara, and Tim Anderson, who didn't get over 7 points was the highest. Everything else was well below. So, there's not much to say. I think even when we had a chance to talk with Adnan Virk, which he's been on the show a couple of times, a good friend of the show, and you can always find those interviews on our Facebook page, Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham. You can just search that on Facebook. Check us out at OO Left Field on Twitter. Our shows are all up there. Should be. If not, you can shoot us a tweet. We will happily tweet you the link. And also you can email us, ooleftfield@gmail.com. So there wasn't much debate there when it came to Fulmer. Even Adnan agreed that Fulmer, he and Seager made perfect sense. The one where he gave us a little bit of grief, and to be honest,
he did.
Owned it when I asked him about it. We tweeted back and forth, and he owned it, was in the Cy Young race, and that was more predominantly in the American League. That, of course, was not without maybe a little bit of controversy and, kind of some headlines of its own, as our pick, Rick Porcello of the Boston Red Sox, narrowly edges out Justin Verlander, and maybe you could have made the case that Verlander easily could have won. There was a 5-point spread. Porcello 137 points, Verlander 132, and Verlander had the most first-place votes with 14. But it was eventually found out that two of the voters that are, I believe one of them, maybe both, are in the Tampa Bay area on the other side of the coast from me, left Verlander completely off of their ballots. So it makes you wonder that, why in the world didn't they even vote for him? And if they had, would he have been in a spot where he would have edged out Porcello or, God forbid, even tied him?
Yeah, and I don't think there's any reason to leave Justin Verlander off the ballot. Justin Verlander had a great year. Not a career year for Justin Verlander, but a career year for the Justin Verlander we've seen in the last 2 or 3 years.
And I think that's a good distinction is, what we had become accustomed to, back in, the late, 2000 to 2009, early into the 2010s. We're not seeing that anymore. That the high power triple digits is gone. He has to work with a lower velocity, and he's working a slider into his mixed changeup, and to a point, kind of reinventing himself. I think it's a great point that you bring up.
I think that when you look at what Justin Verlander did this year compared to what he did last year, I mean, he only won 5 games last year. He started 20. He only won 5. Right? He went 5-8. The year before that, he starts 32 games. He wins 15. That's really where you start to see. 2013 is really where you start to see the decline a little bit. Won 13 games and 34 starts. But for last year, for him to win 5 games and 20 starts, I realized he had some issues of his own. Only threw 133 innings, but for him to only win 5 of those,
right,
is it's really good to see him come back this year, go 227 innings, and
to be fair,
16 games.
He got 7 no decisions out of those. Out of the 20 he started, he went 5-8. So 7 of those games,
right,
he couldn't even garner a decision.
Right,
but yeah,
exactly.
in this one, I mean, you're right. We look at his fastball, his average fastball speed is about 94 miles an hour, so almost a full 10 below what we've seen in the past. But he goes 16-9 with just over a 3 ERA, and pitches almost 230 innings and strikes out 254, which, looking back, is the second most strikeouts that he's had in a season in his career. 2009, he had 269 Ks, and he's just below that, almost 6-7 years down the road. So,
right, and it's 63 more strikeouts. It's 63 more strikeouts than Porcello threw.
Right.
In a similar number of innings, Porcello went 223 innings to Verlander's 227. But
right.
Rick Porcello won 22 games. He went 22-4 in 33 starts.
And I believe he was the only 20-plus game winner we had in the AL. Correct? That was one of our big pieces
that was one of the big deals. Yeah, that was a big deal. I mean, when you look at his strikeouts per walk at 5.91, with Justin Verlander at 4.46, he's thrown an entire strikeout more per walk than Justin Verlander. But you can't look at either of their numbers and say, one of these guys is the shoe-in. But you can look at Verley's numbers and say, man, he struck out 254. He went 227 innings. He had 3.04 ERA. You look at Rick Porcello, guy at a 3.15 ERA, and 223 innings, struck out 189. But that 22 wins, is
because Porcello he's not a power arm. He's not the guy that you expect to blow it away by guys. He's going to be a guy with movement, 2-seamers, change-ups, sliders. He wants to induce contact, easy contact, and he's got a great defense behind him, which we'll get into here in just a minute with the MVP voting. But I agree, man. I mean,
I'd like to point out that Rick Porcello didn't pitch around a single batter all year.
Right.
He didn't issue a single free pass all season.
Yeah, I mean, and that's kind of been his MO. It was the same way last year. This year he really kind of reined it in. And to me, when you're looking at, and obviously I know that you're looking at just what they do as a pitcher, but and again, not being part of the Baseball Writers Association, it's kind of hard to look at this voting and try and keep it in perspective. But you look at how poorly David Price pitched, who was expected to be the guy in Boston with this huge contract that he did, and Porcello really is kind of what held that team together, one of the pieces that held that team together and pushed them towards a divisional title that took them into the second round of the playoffs.
Yeah. Nope, I agree. And Rick Porcello is a guy who came into the league and pitched behind exactly the Justin Verlander that we were talking about when we're used to seeing him perform this way.
And it's funny
Rick
that you say that.
Came in the league
Who else is on that team?
Who's that?
Max Scherzer.
Max. Oh, you mean our National League Cy Young winner, who I don't think anyone else mentioned? And
everyone really was looking at John Lester and Kyle Hendricks, and to be fair, those three guys are who rounded out the top three. But Scherzer with 25 first-place votes, 3 second, a third, and a fourth, 192 points, and he 90 points higher than John Lester, who had 1 first-place vote. Kyle Hendricks had 2. The one that really threw me off, and to be fair, we said we could see it going either way. Mad Bum, who was your pick, ended up 4th. So
right.
But this is what really surprised the heck out of me is Clayton Kershaw finishes 5th. Kershaw finishes 5th, but had 2 first-place votes.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense to me, to be honest with you. The guy missed two full months of baseball. I don't think it's fair to give him first-place votes, and I would venture to guess that those 2 particular writers are probably Los Angeles area writers. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't want to take anything away from the kind of pitcher that Clayton Kershaw is. I've said that from day one. I think Clayton Kershaw is a fantastic pitcher. Will probably go down as one of the best regular season left-handed pitchers in the history of baseball. But the guy was out for 2 months. You don't give that guy first place votes.
Right. And this is different than, and you guys discussed this, obviously a different sport, but this is different than the idea of, in the National Football League of Tom Brady being looked at as maybe being an MVP. Because he misses the beginning of the year, but he can come back and help lead that team down the stretch to a playoff run. Yes, Kershaw came back, but he came back with a week or 2 left in the regular season, and then he goes into the postseason, which doesn't garner anything in Cy Young voting.
Right, and he came back to a Los Angeles Dodgers who were 5 games ahead in the West, and not looking back at a Giants team who was going through an epic downturn at the time.
Yeah,
I just think that that was misplaced voting. I think those votes should have gone elsewhere. I won't defend my pick too much more than to say that Madison Bumgarner had a really rough September. And, of course, I made that pick in August. Madison Bumgarner had a really rough September and still managed to finish 4th in the voting, I think exactly where he probably should have been. But if our listeners will remember, when we made our Cy Young pick, we said we each have a pick, but we can envision either one of those 2 as the National League Cy Young. Now, we know from the people that we've talked to on social media, people who've talked to us on our page, that according to everyone else in baseball, apparently, Max Scherzer was not in the running for the National League Cy Young. This was going to be the Cubs were supposed to sweep, I think,
I disagree.
the postseason awards.
I think Strasburg really was the one who was looked at as potentially winning the Cy Young until an injury. I mean, because guys like Lester and Hendricks didn't pitch enough innings because Madden wanted to go ahead and hold that back, and they had such a good offense they didn't need to.
Right, but we see Kyle Hendricks leading the entire league in ERA, and you and I both know that 9 times out of 10, that number is going to be the first thing that and the number in the wins column are going to be the first thing that the BBWAA looks at when they vote for the Cy Young.
Right.
And for him to have a 2.05 ERA or a 2 ERA,
who's that?
Really around
Hendricks? I believe it was 2.13.
Yeah, for him to have a low 2s ERA to lead the entire league, all of that Major League Baseball in earned run average, and finish. He obviously rightfully finished in the top 3, but a lot of people, especially going through the World Series and watching the way he pitched in the postseason, were saying, "That's it. The kid's a shoo-in. He's going to win the Cy Young. There's no one else." And you, especially, really stuck to your guns about Scherzer, despite the fact that the Nationals, got knocked out in the playoffs, despite the fact that late September was a little bit rough for everyone. But you really stuck to your guns on Scherzer, man, and I think that was a solid pick.
I mean, and I obviously appreciate it. I know we go back and forth, but again, I think he was one of the only 20-game winner in the National League, and 284 strikeouts and right near 230 innings, a higher ERA, sub-3, but I mean, he's a power pitcher who pounds the zone, and that sometimes is going to get you hit.
Right.
But again, he joins, some great names: Gaylord Perry, Pedro Martinez, Randy Johnson, Roger Clemens, Roy Halladay, as the only pitchers to win a Cy Young in both leagues. And I agree.
Yeah.
To me, they got it. The Baseball Writers Association got it right, because I'll say that because Scherzer won, but to me, his overall body of work with the amount of innings he pitched, to me, made him the most complete and best pitcher in the National League. John Lester had an absolute career year, which we discussed. I mean, outshined himself in his prime in Boston after he had come back from cancer treatment. Hendricks with the ERA, and Bumgarner, Bumgarner was Bumgarner, even though it wasn't his best year. He didn't lead at anything, but he was just kind of solid, chugging along, kind of doing what a country boy is going to do.
Well,
so
I think
one
exactly
through
what his position is.
Yeah, I think 1 through 4 makes sense, and then everything kind of gets jumbled, near the bottom. Kershaw, I understand.
Yeah.
I understand Kershaw being in 5th because of what he was doing before he got injured. The first place votes just really throws me off and bugs me. And nothing I can do to take that feeling away.
Now, before we get into what I consider to be the hotly contested award, or the award that we disagree with probably the most, I want to talk briefly about an award that was awarded.
You want to get Manager of the Year before we get into the MVP?
I want to get to Manager of the Year, and the reason I want to get to Manager of the Year is because this is another one. Now, we were only wrong twice, and this is one of those two. And this is one that you and I think both agree that we can see the argument, but we disagree with the sentiment.
Yeah, I mean, Terry Francona wins in the AL. I think that made perfect sense. I mean, he won by a landslide. I mean, Jeff Bannister came in second with 64 points. Tito had 128, 22 first-place votes of the 30. So, to me, that made perfect sense. It basically went Tito, Jeff Bannister, Buck Showalter, John Farrell, and then Joe Girardi and Scott Service for the Mariners got a third-place vote. I'm not really sure why that one happened. But I think that makes sense. Farrell took the Red Sox to the playoffs, but they had a really rocky year. Nothing really ever seemed to gel. Even coming down, bats were hot and cold. They couldn't hold on to a divisional lead. Buck Showalter is always right there. He just, I keep waiting for him to go to that hump, and I really hope he does. Obviously, Bannister has the best team in the American League record-wise, and just unprecedented got swept, went out of the playoffs. So, I'm a little surprised just by the way that it came down the chute, and I'm surprised that even if Scott Service is going to get a vote, I'm surprised that nobody thought that John Gibbons deserved one in Toronto, just because of how hotly contested that AL East was. I would have expected to see his name in there somewhere, even if it's a vote or two. So that that surprised me. But again, we have no problem with Tito taking home the award. The one that throws us off is that Los Angeles Dodgers manager Dave Roberts beats out Joe Madden by 48 points. He doubled him in first-place votes. Robert took home 16 first-place votes, then 7 in second and third, and Joe Madden goes 8, 8, and 6, respectively. So, I mean, really, really threw me off. I had heard the talk about it, and I had mentioned it to you right around when the playoffs were starting. Everyone's saying that Dave Roberts is probably going to win, and we both kind of scoffed, thinking, I don't really know why he would win. I mean, the Dodgers won the division, but a lot of that came because of the Giants' epic collapse, which we've talked about that plenty. And I get he went through injuries and pitching changes, but had the Giants, who had a better record than the World Series champions at the All-Star break, kept doing what they were doing, Dave Roberts wouldn't be in this conversation.
Exactly. And to quote Yahoo Sports, they said that Dave Roberts helped the Dodgers overcome a 9-game deficit in the division over the summer without Clayton Kershaw. Now, yes and no. Dave Roberts did hold his team together at just above 500 through the summer without Clayton Kershaw, a lot of which can be attributed to guys like Rich Hill stepping in and throwing really great games in that time period. But when you also see that after the All-Star break, the Giants lost, I think they went 1-24 in their first 25 games. That's obviously not the Dodgers overcoming a 9-game deficit. That's the Giants giving up a 9-game lead. And in fact, the Giants were 9 games up on the Dodgers at the break, and ended up only 5 games back.
And one of the things that you mentioned a lot of, and again, because you're on the West Coast, you get to watch a lot more of these than I do, but that even coming down, they were still playing pretty much 500 baseball. It wasn't, it wasn't a great year. And I get everyone, maybe it kind of got lost because the storyline was, man, Kershaw's hurt. So for him to go ahead and be able to take them in, what a job he did because Kershaw was hurt, and you have this, huge rotation of people coming through, and Josh Reddick, who we'll get to in a few minutes, didn't perform the way you hoped he would coming from Oakland, and you get Rich Hill with the blister issue, who comes in and has a great postseason, but still kind of struggled when he first got into L.A. So it's easy to say, man, he had a difficult time and was able to go ahead and overcome it. But to me, at the end of the day,
not to take anything away, they had 28 players on the DL.
Right.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
But
plus he gets the issue with Puig in the clubhouse. With him acting how he does, getting sent down, getting brought back up. And I get that maybe you're also looking at the fact of how well he can manage personalities and the players that he has. But at the same time, you have Joe Madden, and a lot of the argument was that, Joe Madden was expected to win the World Series, expected to win the division. It's basically World Series or bust with Theo. He brought him in just for this purpose. So, okay, he did status quo, and we thought beginning of the year, Cubbies were going to be 140-game winners, which is so freaking unrealistic anyway. So they finish, 103 and 50, whatever it ends up being, 103 and 58, 59?
Right.
So that I mean, that's not good enough to have the best record in baseball, and the postseason has no bearing on this. So he took the expectation that he had, met them, and did so in a very convincing and a very,
unconventional.
Let's
not forget unconventional way. We're talking about a guy who would get into and did get into long games in deep into extra innings, and instead of depleting his bullpen, he made the decision to put pitchers in as position players so that he could swap them out without taking them out of the game.
Right.
That is a manager. That's what a National League manager does. That is how, not only does it show how the National League is the real strategic league in the game, but it
Say that one more time,
though. Madden,
say that one more time.
Right now.
No, I'm not being funny. I mean, it's what a National League manager does.
Right.
He came from the American League. So think about it. It's his first year in the NL, and he's doing these things that you're talking about.
Right. And this shows. It not only does it show that the National League is strategically more difficult to play in than the American League, but it shows that Joe Madden can be that strategic National League manager. I mean, it shows that Joe Madden was probably among the most strategic National League managers in baseball last year. I mean, when you look at guys who are great National League managers, you think Dusty Baker, right? You think Bruce Bochy.
Yep. Even Mike Matheny.
And now Mike Matheny, and now you have to think Joe Madden, just for the way that Joe Madden ran the game this last season as a National League manager.
Exactly, and it being his, and I get everyone's thing is, man, it's Dave Roberts' first time as a manager, I think he's going to do a fantastic job in LA. I think that if he can get a couple more pieces, we'll see them deep into October. We might finally see them in a World Series. But to me this year, with all the expectations put on Chicago, and like you said, the unconventional way that Joe Madden was able to do what he did to put the Cubs in position to have home field throughout the divisional and the championship series, and they struggled. But he knows how to keep it light, how to keep guys relaxed. I still think, like I said, but I agree that I think that both managers that were in the World Series should have been the managers of the year. And that brings us to the primo number one cream of the crop award in the game, and that's obviously going to be the MVP awards. And Chris Bryant and Mike Trout win. We had no doubt that Chris Bryant was going to win. I think it made perfect sense. I think had he not had such a season like he did, that Daniel Murphy could have potentially had a shot, but I mean, Chris Bryant walked away with it. He had 29 first-place votes and 1 second-place vote. And I think it's pretty obvious that the one first-place vote that Daniel Murphy had is the second-place vote that Bryant got. But almost 200 points higher than everybody else. But then it got pretty tight. Murphy with 245, Corey Seager with 240 points right behind him, and then Anthony Rizzo and Nolan Arenado rounded out. But what really got you and me, we picked Jose Altuve of the Houston Astros as who we thought was going to be the choice. Mookie Betts had really begun to struggle. It really kind of came up in a very important time, deep into September, when the Red Sox needed that push to try and get a bye basically out of the wild card game. But Mike Trout blew me away. Won won the MVP. And I love Mike Trout. I think he's a great player. I think he is undeniably one of the faces of baseball. But he did not deserve the MVP award this year, especially on a team that played as bad as the Angels. And I am not a guy who thinks that you have to be on a championship team or a great team to win MVP.
No, I don't.
But I didn't
don't
see
either,
MVP
but
stuff.
I will go so far as to say that I think that you should at least be on a team that competes.
Yeah.
And the Angels did not compete. The Angels won 74 games. The Angels didn't compete this year. They didn't come out to win a championship. They didn't come out to go to the playoffs. They didn't. In my opinion, the Angels are not a team that have a most valuable player type guy, just because, in my opinion, again,
this year.
If you want to argue with this year, if you want to argue with us, if you want to tell me that I'm wrong, or which Graham likes to tell me I'm wrong all the time. So, but if you want to tell me I'm wrong, then hit us up on Twitter at OOLeftField. Find us on Facebook, Out of Left Field, hosted by Chris and Graham. You can even email me, ooleftfield@gmail.com, and tell me you think I'm stupid or whatever. You're not going to hurt my feelings, but I just don't think that.
And to be fair, I'm not telling you that you're wrong. I'm just reminding you that you're wrong. It's a friendly reminder. That's all.
Right. And I just don't think that a team that absolutely doesn't compete has any business having a player in the running for the MVP. Most valuable player, in my mind, means most valuable player on a team who pushes his team into a place where they can compete. Now, Mike Trout ended this year with a WAR that's a wins above replacement. Now, if you guys don't know what wins above replacement means, that means the number of wins you can expect from a player based on his ability to play the game better than the average position player at his position, the average replacement player. So Mike Trout ends this season with a wins above replacement of 10.6, which means that Mike Trout accounted for 10 of those 74 wins. Now, that sounds really great, that's a really high WAR. Mookie Betts accounted for exactly one fewer win than Mike Trout did at 9.6. However, Mookie Betts played on the best team in the best league, or in the best division in baseball. Whereas Mike Trout spent half of his season playing teams like the Astros, who competed, teams like the Mariners, who competed, and teams like the A's, who did not compete.
Right. But no, it's a good point as we look at it. Is, we talked about Francona and how he was really having to fight off Brad Ausmus and his Tigers coming down the stretch. And in the wild card, we thought that there was a possibility. Obviously, my original pick early in the year was that the Astros were going to end up making. I thought they were going to make a push for the wild card. I didn't think that the Rangers were going to hold on. I thought they were a little bit of fool's gold, and I think that kind of proved itself, albeit in the postseason. And then at the tail end, your Mariners, who you picked, were sitting, just right behind the Tigers, and we had about 3 or 4 teams that could have made a late push for second wild card in the American League. But, so we picked Jose Altuve, and he finishes the year 640 at-bats on out of 717 plate appearances. Obviously, depends on, what an official at-bat becomes. So all that kind of stuff between sacks and intentional walks, all that kind of jazz. So
reaching on an error,
right?
fielder's choice,
right.
That sort of thing.
Exactly. So our pick finishes with 216 hits, 24 home runs, 96 runs batted in, and a .338 batting average with a .928 OPS, which is solid. I mean, no doubt that with as much as Dallas Keuchel struggled, Carlos Correa was hurt. They tried to bring in additional pieces to kind of get things going. It was fantastic. And we look, and you compare that to Mike Trout, who had 549 at-bats. So almost 100 fewer at-bats than Jose Altuve. He had 123 runs.
And he came to the plate. 70 less times.
Right, exactly. Yeah, 681.
50 less times.
Yeah, 50 fewer times, 681 plate appearances compared to 717. 173 hits, which is 43 behind Altuve. 29 dingers, which he just edges out Altuve, who had 24. And Mike Trout has 100 runs batted in, but where he exceeded in the eyes of a lot of the voters was in OPS and on base. 991 OPS, but slugging for Betts, Altuve, and Trout, 1, 2, and 3, was within about 20 points. Trout was at 550, Betts was at 534, and Altuve was at 531. So they're all right next to each other, but Mike Trout has a 441 on base. Now, you and I discussed that, and I can tell, I want, as a hitter, tell our listeners why that on-base number, that 441 on-base number, which is well ahead of the 396 of Altuve and the 363 of Betts, is pretty skewed.
Well, it's a pretty simple thing to figure out. Mike Trout plays on an Angels team who doesn't have a whole lot of depth in their lineup. Mike Trout is the most dangerous hitter on that team. People say, that there are other guys on there who can hit. Obviously, there are other guys on there who can hit. But Mike Trout is the most dangerous hitter. And when you don't have another dangerous guy in the lineup, pitchers can throw around you. He was issued 12 free passes, right? He walked 116 times. Now, Mike Trout walked 116 out of 549 at-bats, 681 plate appearances, simply because pitchers don't have to put the ball in the strike zone against Mike Trout because they know that they can attack the guy behind him. Or they can attack the guy in front of him and pitch loose to Trout.
Right.
Because
you got
nine of those two guys.
Right, and you've got Pujols and Escobar pretty much are the two guys that are sitting, 4 or 5 in that area where Trout's usually going to try and get on base and lead into them moving him around. And we know Pujols has been struggling. It's been chronicled how poorly he's been struggling in the latter part of his career with the plantar fasciitis and the other injuries that we've seen.
Right. That 441 on base percentage is a drastically inflated number simply because pitchers don't have to pitch to Mike Trout. They can walk Mike Trout over and over and over again. And where you see where that number doesn't coincide with Mike Trout being a great batter necessarily, not taking at bats deep, is that when he does get pitched to, he doesn't hit the ball anywhere near as much as either of these other two guys. Right? Mookie Betts had 214 hits. Jose Altuve had 216 hits. Mike Trout had 173. This is not a guy who, when he gets the opportunity to swing the bat, swings the bat effectively. He did hit 30 home runs, 29 home runs. You can't take that away from him. But Mike Trout is a power hitter. If Mike Trout doesn't hit 29 or 30 home runs, something's wrong. But Mookie Betts hit 31 home runs. But he had 214 hits. Jose Altuve hit 24 home runs. But again, he had 216 hits. You see where I'm going with this? I mean,
yeah, And to your point, we're talking about the intentional walk. With the top 9, basically, the guys who are pretty much, seeing the consistent time in the field for the Angels. There are, let's say, even out of the top 15, roughly 20, maybe 21 intentional passes. Half of those, a dozen, go to Mike Trout. The closest, Albert Pujols with 6.
Right. Right.
So, granted, yes, he's a great player, but when you can work your way around that player, because
right.
That player can affect the outcome, and if you get around it, then you remove that effectiveness. You can't go ahead and then take, at least to me, that on-base percentage as being a positive when he's just being worked around so that he can't be a part of the offensive production.
Right. And when you look at a guy like Mookie Betts, who, in my opinion, at this point, I think that Mookie Betts should have finished number 1 in the voting.
I agree.
I think you agree. Mookie Betts was issued 1 intentional walk. Why was Mookie Betts issued 1 intentional walk? That's easy. David Ortiz, Jackie Bradley, those guys are dangerous hitters.
Yeah, Hanley Ramirez.
Mookie Betts is also Hanley Ramirez. Those guys are dangerous hitters.
Yeah.
That was an explosive, powerful offense. You can't throw around Mookie Betts. Because if you throw around Mookie Betts, you got to face one of those guys.
Yeah.
And
you're just putting more runs on the possibility of going down further. And to your point, Jose Altuve had 11 intentional passes.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I were talking earlier before the show that that Mookie Betts, that there's a stat for intentional walks, the IBB stat,
yep,
which you can look up and you can say, hey, Mookie Betts was only walked 1 time. But there's no stat for these other walks, this other 102 walks, 104 walks that Mike Trout drew, to tell you whether this is Mike Trout forcing a pitcher to throw around him, working a count, or if this is a pitcher who feels like he doesn't have to go in against Mike Trout because he can go after the next guy. But you look at the lineup for the Angels, and you can tell very easily which one of those 2 situations you're looking at.
Definitely. And I think as we kind of end this part of the discussion, the part that got me, if we look kind of towards the rest of the season, if we're taking the season as a whole, we saw Mookie Betts. Plus, you had Xander Bogaerts in there as well. Someone we didn't mention, and the production that lineup had, and you look at the way and they said the WAR that Betts had, and what it meant for the Red Sox because they were fighting down to the last couple of days to win that division. Yeah, I agree. It would have made more sense for it to be him, and that's fine saying, you know what, we said maybe we should have been 8 out of 8. I don't mind saying Altuve may have been the one that, we saw coming into it that he was one of the best players in, and he was, but when it came down to it, that's most likely, I think it's clear, meant more to his team because of what the production that he had was going to mean going into the postseason. So I agree. I think that whether or not it could have been Mookie or Jose, I don't think Mike Trout should have won that award. And that's not to say he isn't a fantastic player. He is, but this is just one of those times where I don't think that I don't think that they got it right. And I think a lot of it comes off of the defensive prowess that we've seen in the past from him. And it kind of maybe garners him a little bit extra, I don't want to say, a pass to it, but, I think it gets him a respect even maybe when something isn't there. But you can't hold it against Betts to be on a high-powered offense when Chris Bryant was on one of the best offenses in the league and, wins almost unanimously.
Right. Now, I don't think we're going to really get to our continued breakdown of the American League East. it's getting pretty late, and there's some other things that we need to, I think, discuss, and that is Jose Altuve's team. Real quick, I just wanted to touch real quick on what the Houston Astros have done this week that I think makes them a contender for next season. First of all, they went out and they filled a huge need. They picked up McCann from the Yankees.
Yep.
And to fill that need behind the dish. We know that Brian McCann is a great catcher. And we know that he's probably going to do pretty well. But another thing that they did,
I've actually been seeing that there's a good possibility that Brian McCann might actually be transitioning to first base with this move. We know that the Astros, and we touched on them earlier this year. Obviously, when we were talking about them, when I made the pick of thinking that they had a good chance of obviously making it, to the playoff. But Evan Gattis was was one of their catchers, and also Max Stassi. So Stassi's 25 years old. I'm interested to see if he stays up there next year. I don't think that McCann defensively is what they want to have as a 32-year-old sitting behind the dish. We knew the transition was coming because of Gary Sanchez.
Right.
I think he may be a better play somewhere else in the field, or or you can put him in Gattis between catching and DH roles. Right.
But it's a need that they needed to fill, and McCann is a bat. And they need a bat. I mean, yeah. Everybody needs bats, but the Astros need bats.
Right, because Beltran is potentially. I'm sorry, not Beltran. Carlos Gomez, I believe, was signed as a free agent, and then he left. So there's not much out there hitting wise because Beltran is supposedly being lured again by New York.
But to that same point of the Astros needing a bat, they made another huge move this week, and they signed Josh Reddick to a four-year, $56 million deal. So Reddick obviously did something right for the Dodgers heading into the postseason. That second half after the trade deadline when he went to LA, he obviously did something impressive. I think that I've always thought that Josh Reddick is a great everyday outfielder. He has a strong arm. He's a big bat when you need it. I think it's a good move for the Astros. But I think most importantly is the Astros have shown that they got close this year. And close isn't going to cut it for them. They want in to that postseason picture.
Right. And I think we'll expect to see Dallas Keuchel pitching better this year. He really came off very flat from that Cy Young award that he picked up last season. But guys like Altuve, Carlos Correa is going to come back much more healthy. I think having McCann on the corners, depending on how much agility he has, will be good. They picked up Nori Aoki from Toronto. We'll see what that does. Obviously, you have George Springer, who is a speed demon, but needs to be able to put the ball in play more. You bring in Josh Reddick. Reddick is normally going to be a right fielder. So I don't really think that that's where George Springer has played this year. So I'm curious to see who they put where. Because the one thing you have to wonder is who draws the short straw having to play with that horrific hill in center field in Minute Maid Stadium.
Right. Exactly. So, I think this is another great show. I think that you and I have probably shown now that we have a pretty good handle on the game. We went 6 for 8. Probably can make the argument that we should have been 7 for 8 in postseason awards.
I'm doing the best I can trying to carry you, man. I mean, I know I'm doing the best I can to try and bring you along.
Okay. Well, guys, next week we are going to continue our series, Women in Baseball, with another interview with another female player who is actually the teammate of Stacey Piagno, who we interviewed last week, Kelsey Whitmore. She also plays for the Sonoma Stompers. She's going to be on the show next week, and we're also going to get into our completed breakdown of the American League East and anything else that might come straight out of left field.